Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today for the Friday Masterclass, where today we're going to be talking about color grading basics and really going through the very basic fundamentals of working with color in Premiere Pro using the Lumetri Color Panel. Now, the Lumetri Color Panel has a whole bunch of modules pretty much designed kind of in the order of, well, how much do you want to get into and how much you're willing to experiment. So the first 3 or 4 modules, this is what we're going to cover today. These are kind of the basics, and if you kind of understand how to wield those, then in a future episode, we'll kind of cover the other ones, which we've done on stream before. But this is really going to be about just some very basic things around color. We've done a lot of stuff around fundamentals. This is, and I was talking to a friend of mine who just started shooting recently, and they're struggling with sort of color grading, color correction. And I said, there's some really, if you know 3 or 4 things, you can do it, right? You don't have to be a color theorist. Now, it is an art form, and there are colorists who specialize in that, and they're amazing. And I'm not one of them. But if you understand some of the basic fundamentals of how the Lumetri Color Panel works, and there's a couple little cool little techniques along the way that can kind of help get you there faster, then, you can do a pretty slick job and certainly make your footage look better, if nothing else. So as always, we're coming to you across Adobe Live, Behance, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Shout out to our friends on No Film School today. So thank you so much for joining. Today will, in fact, be the last episode with our friends at No Film School. So hope you enjoy this one. We've been doing it since March or so. So you've got a whole archive of content there. And as always, just a couple of quick shout outs here. Tom and Marcel Lee, Premiere Pro, CC Mentor, Avinash, Mix Sen, Lauda Salama, Laura, Cody Bear, Ezatula, Steve, Kosaboom, how are you doing? Charles, Rick Adams, Jack Watson, Michelle, and Danielle V. Nice to see you. Okay, so, we're going to cut right into it today. Lamia Fadi Mustafa from Cairo. Oh, great to see you. All right. Rudra, nice to see you too. Kevin Allen, your screen is frozen. Is it telling you to let it go? Let's see what I did there. The dad jokes never stop here on stream. Okay. Sometimes I know lately LinkedIn, for whatever reason, at times it freezes. I think you just need a refresh. I don't know what that's all about. I'll yell at them. Oh, you see me now. Okay, thank you, Tom. All right. Christina D, there's lag. Yeah, let's get him. No, be kind. Just checking here. Okay, very good. All right, so color. Couple things. So first of all, looking at my screen here, I have a particular sort of color workspace that I typically use for everything. Now, we have a whole bunch of workspaces already created for you, as you all well know. There is one dedicated to color. I've since modified this one, but just a couple essential things that I'd like to keep up kind of front and center. First of all, of course, is the Lumetri Color Panel itself. And this is where most of your work is going to occur. Now, there are lots of other plugins and third-party tools, and there are other color effects in Premiere Pro that could be used in conjunction with or in replace of Lumetri Color itself, but this is sort of our main way to color grade, color correct. And we're going to kind of, again, dive a bit into this today. So I always keep that docked for myself on the right. Now again, your UI may look a little bit different. Of course, we have our program monitor here in the center. And then over here on the left side of the screen, I'd like to bring up my scopes. Now, we could, as I've discussed in previous streams, spend a lot of time talking about scopes and what these mean. And anyone who's ever tried to color grade and doesn't really know it, and they know that there's like all these different scopes, and you've seen what they look like, and you can add all different kinds of very cool displays here. Some of these to the novice are more useful than others. Quite honestly, though, I think the two that are the most useful are the Waveform Rgb, which you see here on the left, and the RGB Parade on the right, okay? And without going into extremely boring details, because you can find that elsewhere, here's what you need to know about these if you're just gonna start out with color, okay? Again, I've been trying to think of how to make this really not complicated. Here's what it is. Waveform RGB here, this is basically displaying luminance values, right? Your brightness for all of your various colors across on this scale. In this case, a 0 to 100 IRE, okay? If we were at HDR, it would be in some cases 0 to 1,000 or 0 to 10,000, okay? But the default here is 0 to 100. That's what we're going to work with here. And then our RGB parade is saturation. So it's the saturation of red, green, and blue in your clips. And again, where 0 is, the bottom, 100 is the top. Now, if you look again here sort of in the luminance values, 0 luminance means that there's just no shadow detail, right? So if you've got a lot of information down in the very bottom here, in your shadows, approaching 0 on your Waveform RGB, that's probably telling you that you don't have a lot of gradient going from sort of black to gray or black to brown, or in this case, we're in this little forest scene here. It's actually not, it's not pinning the bottom, as you can see. We're sort of right at the edge there. But there is a decent amount of shadow detail. So that's what this bottom is talking about here. This is what it's showcasing to us, shadow detail, all right? And on the opposite spectrum of that, all the way up at the top, your highlight detail, which you can see we've got some clipping highlights, right? This is a problem. This is a bigger problem if you're going out to sort of like traditional broadcast, or, if you're producing something for, well, even YouTube as well, but, Netflix, Hulu, all those other streaming networks. And you can see here that, yes, we probably have, it's right on the edge, probably about there, some clipped highlights or white. So we want to sort of bring that into range. You don't want extremely crushed shadows, and you don't want blown out highlights, right? You want to kind of minimize those and then take advantage of dynamic range, which is another conversation. We're gonna kind of introduce this as we go along. But that's what these two scopes represent. Luminance, Waveform RGB, saturation, RGB parade, okay? And you always want to be conscious of, again, how bright, how dark, and then how saturated. Make sense? I think so. Maybe not. Okay. So with that in mind, we're looking at our first clip here. We got a little friend walking through the forest. All right. Now, again, it doesn't matter what kind of camera you shoot with, or what kind of, whether it's iPhone or whether it's a DSLR or mirrorless or a professional, camera, Arri or a Red or BMCC or whatever. But one of the fundamental things that we do when we're shooting, of course, is deal with sort of setting the white balance. And again, depending upon your familiarity with the controls of your camera, I'm a Nikon shooter. A friend of mine's a Sony shooter. He lent me his Sony. And the menu system is totally different. I didn't really know. I was like trying to set white balance. It was going to some weird presets. I could never get it right. So everything kind of looked wrong. Now, this is not my footage here, but in this case, the white balance is not correct. Now, it may have somewhat appeared that way at time of day or whenever this was, kind of with that greenish cast. But ultimately, especially if you're going to be grading, before you sort of stylize, maybe you want to set the white balance properly like we would do with photos. So we make this really easy inside of Lumetri with the white balance eyedropper, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to take the white balance eyedropper here, and what you ultimately want to do is find something in your footage, something in your frame that is, the closest to sort of whitish gray. That's how this is going to use a little bit of math, a little bit of machine learning here to give you a white balance. So let's go ahead and select this. I'm going to go to sort of not the full white, but sort of the whitish gray area of the shoe. Again, being careful not to choose like the muddy area of the shoe, right? It's going to give us a different white balance, okay? And that's the other thing too. It's something in your footage that should be white, right? It could be a grayish shoelace or whatever, maybe something that was white but is stained in the frame. It's going to do its best job to try and accommodate for that, right? So single click here, and now we are white balanced. And what you'll see very quickly is that it has automatically adjusted the sliders, the temperature and tint, to give you that more natural looking balance of color here. Very simple, very fundamental. Now, again, you might want kind of that greenish cast. I've seen many a movie goes for, heavy on the tinted green or sort of the blue overcast or whatever it is. But setting white balance in and of itself, super simple right here with the white balance eyedropper, okay? Now this particular clip here was also shot in a non-log color space. Okay, you could theoretically say linear. Something akin to like an older iPhone or an older DSLR where you didn't have log or you couldn't shoot RAW. So one of the things you're going to notice is that while it did make some significant adjustments here that you can see on the scopes to our luminance and our saturation, again, when we white balance corrected, there's some decent shadow information in here, but you know, we're kind of approaching the bottom, and we do have, again, some of those slightly blown out highlights. Now, when you're shooting in something like an 8-bit DSLR or an older iPhone, and it's using something like a Rec 709 color space, all that color is kind of baked in. So in the case of something like this, now this happens to be a higher bit depth piece of footage in any case, but what that really means to you in terms of color correction or color grading is that you may not have as much latitude to really affect the overall image. So you might incur some noise by, again, maybe trying to decrease the contrast or increase the contrast or work with the highlights. Essentially, if you've blown out stuff at the sensor and you're not shooting in log or raw, just like with imagery, right? Just like photography, right? If you shoot an image as a JPEG and you've got a blown out sky and crushed shadows where it just goes completely to black, you bring it into Lightroom and you try and restore that sky. Oh, I think there were clouds in there. And you're pulling down exposure and you're pulling down, you know, white and highlights, and nothing happens, right? Well, compressed file format, 8-bit, it was gone at the sensor. So you can't necessarily restore that based on, again, a couple of attributes, however it was captured. So some of your footage is going to incur that. If you shoot in something like log, which I think all of the new Sony cameras now do, S-Log 3. This is a gamma-based curve. This is going to give you, by design, more latitude, more definition in the midtones and the shadows, but it also means that you kind of have to add that color back in after the fact. It's shooting an S-Log is intended to be graded after the fact, right? So when you look at a lot of your cameras and things that have, you know, picture styles, they're baking in that particular look. The idea being, yeah, maybe you tweak it a little before you deliver it to YouTube. You're not going to be able to push it probably that far. And again, there are some instances where it might be. But when you look at things like, again, Sony S-Log 3, or shooting with a red camera, or shooting with an area, I mentioned like a Blackmagic camera that shoots, they have their own B-RAW, right? It's super flat looking. It almost looks completely desaturated, like nothing's there, because the idea is that, one, you have all this detail that's been captured, but you have to do the work to add all of that back in. And I'm going to show you some other examples of like MP4 compressed iPhone footage where we can push it a little, but you start to incur some noise, all right? So let's talk a little bit about some of that and working with slightly different formats here. So, shown this footage before. Now this was shot log, which again, as you take a look at this footage, you can see it's a beautiful shot, but it is, you know, sort of somewhat flat, you know, as you talk. Some of the terms here, just like audio, they're a little creepy, but you know, it's like sort of creamy, right? It's just sort of like flat, not saturated, not contrasty, and more importantly, there's a lot of detail in the shadows, right? And this is really what you want before you start grading. So when you're kind of exposing this in camera, when you're shooting this, there's, by the way, ways to do this on your older DSLRs as well. This is something I learned in the DSLR boom by Philip Bloom. He kind of changed the world with this. Let's say you're shooting with, you know, an older Canon. I know now there's Canon RAW and all these other formats, but you're shooting with like a 7D or an older 5D, or even I think the 6D or 60D. I don't think those shot RAW yet. It's been a while since I've been in that world. You drop the contrast, you drop the saturation, you drop the sharpness when filming, and you're going to get something that looks kind of like this. And what that's going to allow you to do, even though, again, that's format-wise, you're not getting all the latitude of raw or log footage, it is going to give you more latitude to add back in a little bit more color and have just a little more flexibility when you're working with color on your footage. So this content here, this was shot, again, with S-Log. And when you shoot stuff log or you shoot stuff with red, these often will require what are known as, in our language here, input LUTs to kind of bring you back to sort of a baseline before you begin grading. Now you could effectively apply those LUTs and leave it, but generally you apply the LUT and then you start working in these basic correction sliders here. So just to show real quickly, I'm going to come up to my input LUT section here in basic correction where we actually have slog3, okay? So this is exactly what we want to use in this case. Go ahead and choose this here. And then right away you're going to see, oh wow, like significant difference. And this is, again, in the real world, probably what it looked like on that day in that moment, okay? Now, you might also be saying to yourself, well, okay, this looks beautiful, but it maybe, again, depending upon stylistically how you want to go with it, maybe the shadows, it's a little crushed, we're losing a little bit of the detail here and there. You have the ability to make those stylistic choices. But now, and because all of that content is in the footage already, now we can start playing around. So again, if we want to warm this up, really take advantage of that, beautiful, kind of looks like golden hour right there, right? And, immediately just looking at before and after, whoa, that's what it looked like before? There was sunlight here? You couldn't even tell, right? These are the things that by using the appropriate LUT based on this footage, whoa, what? That was there the whole time? Yes, okay. Now, I probably wouldn't touch saturation. Maybe we come into exposure a little, right? And again, look at our scopes here. We are still very much within sort of comfortable legal ranges here, right? No blown out highlights, no crushed shadows here. Again, I didn't shoot this. Whoever did knew how to expose footage properly, right? Well done, okay? Now, again, for my taste, I might want to make this a little bit sort of more film-like. I don't typically like things very high contrast. So you can see as you start to minimize contrast here, you're going to start to bring back some of that shadow detail while still maintaining the richness and saturation provided by that LUT, okay? You can also, adjust shadows here, right? Maybe adjust black level here. And notice as I adjust the black level, notice how, look at the floor on our scopes here, right? Pay attention to this area down here. And by the way, you can see it's looking a little clipped and I don't have it clamped here. So we want to be careful with this. As I'm adding more black, we're kind of hitting that bottom right there, right? We are effectively clipping right there. So we don't really want that. You just want to be careful with that. We can drop it down to about 3.3 and still have a little bit of that dynamic range left, okay? And then we can saturate accordingly if we want. Something like this. So very quickly, right? Oh, and I should put my effects. Let me put my effects by. Oh, I have it there. Okay. It's nice to do it in this view. So before, after. Just using basic correction, using the LUT that went along with this footage, okay? Now, what if you don't have that? Let's go to something like this. Okay, so this is some footage that I shot with my iPhone, okay? And this was in Santa Cruz, I don't know, a couple years ago. Just with the standard iPhone camera app. So it was 4K, but no other settings going on here. First thing you're going to see, of course, we've got some severe clipped highlights. Now, shadow detail, however, because it was very bright, right? Not golden hour per se, but end of the day, sun setting, but we're at the ocean here. You can see, God, it's not bad here. Like we have some range still. And as I zoom in, I don't know if this is coming across on stream, probably not because we're only at 6 megabits today. You can actually see that there's like brush, there's bushes and stuff here. It's all there. Only in the very, very corner of the frame here does it appear to be like totally black, just full shadow. So even with this is like an iPhone 6. No, iPhone 10 because it's 4K, but not ProRes 422, standard MP4 here. And I just saved these out as .movs just so you're aware. So let's kind of fix some of the issues here, okay? Because we've got these clipped highlights at the top. Now you might think I'm going to go right to the highlights and bring that down, but actually That's not going to do it. What we're going to do instead is we're going to use this slider here under whites to kind of tamp some of that down. And as I do that, what you're going to see is now we're going to sort of restore some of that. Now, again, if we go we can almost pull this all the way down. And we are revealing a little bit more of the detail. Now, there's a little bit of noise that we're getting right about here. Again, I don't know how well this is coming across on stream. That's because this is an MP4. It's a compressed format. It's 8-bit, recorded with, you know, I didn't drop contrast or anything, so it's meant to sort of look good on the iPhone, which it does. It's very contrasty, very saturated. But we are actually sort of bringing back and restoring some of that and cutting down some of those highlights. Now, we can further pull down highlights here a little bit. We're losing a little bit of that shimmer in the water. Exposure will, of course, do this too, right? And what we actually see, surprisingly, is it's not flatlined anymore. So it wasn't sort of completely clipped away. Not bad. Again, we weren't shooting into the sun either. That helps, okay? Now, one of the things that can sort of greatly or adversely affect this, of course, is working with temperature. So we really wanted to increase that golden hour. We got to be mindful. You see, now watch those scopes. You know, this is probably more of what it really looked like in person, right? Maybe add a little saturation here. Now look what's happening. Oh, we're starting to kind of bring some of that clipping back again. Got to be careful. Maybe back this off. Now, it's not to say that you can't have those clipped highlights. Again, going to YouTube, you know, if you're not going to broadcast TV, no one cares. However, different monitors, different viewing experiences for different people. You don't want highlights kind of blowing it out and ruining the image. So you're always trying to find sort of a balance there. Similarly with shadows. If you don't want shadow detail and you like full contrast, that's up to you, all right? But again, within balance. That's sort of what you're trying to go for when grading here, if you're not going fully stylistic, right? So again, if we can like crush all of that, you know, that's sort of cool-ish, but we lose all that detail. By the way, if I just pump these up, this is just to make my point here. Now that's with increasing all of the shadows. Kind of amazing, actually. Now you can see all that detail. Look, the iPhone actually captured that. And you can even see you can't see it on the screen. There is some detail right here in the corner. It didn't go all the way to black, which is reflected in our luminance scope. So, you know, people have said too, and I want to point this out. I'm just going to go here real quickly. Preferences. Is it general or appearance? I think it's general. Yeah. Display color management. You want this on by default. Partly because it's going to sort of understand the type of monitor you're using and, again, color manage the look on your monitor. But, you know, look, I'm not a colorist. I don't have multiple monitors. I don't have an HDMI output going to a television to see what this is going to look like. So, again, the way you see it on your laptop or computer screen isn't necessarily how everyone's going to see it, necessarily. So this is why it's a combination of using your eyes here, but leveraging those scopes and going, okay, I'm not like going completely into just darkness. There's still some detail left there. And this is proving that to me. And while you can't see it on stream, I can actually see it here on my monitor. All right, pretty cool. Now, again, that's with like increasing the shadows, pulling them all the way up. And when you do that, now you have sort of additional things that you can do, right? Once you've kind of flattened this out, which is to add creative looks or LUTs, L-U-T-S, also known as lookup tables. Now, I've already got this sort of film style LUT applied here. I didn't realize that was already on. I'm going to turn this off real quickly. And that's just adding a slightly lower contrast look to the footage itself. So here it is without that LUT. Again, scope's looking pretty good here. If you go into our creative LUTs here, there's a whole series of them. Now, to use these will look good, again, if you've got footage that was, again, well exposed, properly balanced. If you've got something that's really already highly contrasty, saturated, your mileage may vary when using those creative LUTs. It's just like applying a preset in Instagram. You know, if you've got an image that's just like super high contrast, super saturated, and you use one of their gazillion filters, you know, a lot of them look pretty bad because it's applying in many cases, more color, more saturation, more contrast on top of something that already has a lot of that. So a recommendation that I often make to people experimenting with color and specifically wanting to use these presets, and there are lots of them, and some of them are super cool. Try and again, sort of balance out your footage before you apply them. Because even by doing some of that balancing, let's go to this first one here, which is called CineSpace. This one is very hard to apply on most footage, to be honest. But you can see right away, it just like, you know, now again, theoretically, there's still some shadow detail, although it appears to be clipped down here, which it very clearly is. It's, you know, like it's kind of cool. You're sort of getting some luminance off of the mountain here. And again, stylistically, maybe that's what you want. And by the way, this is video. We can play this. Okay. Got our clipped highlights back going on there, however. But there's just, for me, there's just no detail there anymore, right? So this is why I prefer something like some of these film stock LUTs. So watch the comparison here. This is this Fuji 250 Kodak 230 2395, which means, so this is emulating film stock. So this means shot, it's emulating as if it were shot on Fuji Eterna 250D, processed on Kodak 2395. Let's go to this LUT. Whoa. Like Detail City, right? Totally different. And then you still have additional controls here inside the creative panel. So we have intensity, right, to increase the intensity of the application of that film stock LUT. Faded film, I use this one a lot. Again, this is just going to give you that slightly lower contrast film-like aesthetic. I love this. I tend to use this pretty often. Sharpen, I think I've used the Sharpen slider maybe twice. Again, be very, very careful with that. It's very easy to overdo sharpening, especially in the digital domain. And you get something that just looks so, yeah, I mean, yeesh. Oh, we're in half res too. Let's play it at full res. Yeah, I mean, not a fan with that, you know. But that's up to you. Vibrance, like this, again, be careful. Use sparingly. Now, this is another question that people ask all the time. Vibrance versus saturation. Saturation is, can you say saturation is saturating? Sort of a circular definition there. But it's applying a boost to all colors across the spectrum evenly. Saturation. Vibrance is identifying, okay, we have sort of a primary amount of brown, right, which I guess falls into the red category. And we have, you know, the existence of some greenish blue. So vibrance affects the most present colors in your clip. Saturation is applying, again, a boost to all colors in that spectrum, which is why when you sort of oversaturate, you know, you're sort of, you lose balance because it's affecting everything. Whereas if you just kind of were to overdo vibrance, again, you can see it's kind of leaning more into those orange reddish hues and the bluish greenish hues here. Okay? This one I also say, use sparingly. And then there's an additional saturation here in the post-LUT application phase. You also have highlight tint and shadow tint. So right now the shadows are tinting naturally in this clip towards a sort of warmer aesthetic. If you wanted to then further cool off some of those shadows, you can see I can pull this towards the sort of blue, even go into the magenta. And that's actually quite beautiful. Again, stylistic choice. Maybe you're going, that sucks. That's up to you. But before, okay, after. Before, after. Totally different look, okay? Same with highlight tint. Maybe we want the highlights to be warmer. Shadows cooler, highlights warmer. But again, maybe going more towards the reds, okay? Before, after, real time. All right? It's just a little bit of experimentation. Now, something that I didn't say up front, which I often say all the time, is related to these basic correction controls. These are the same controls, minus the input LUT. So everything under color and light that you have in Lightroom's Develop module and in Adobe Camera Raw. So if you've done this on images, on stills, you can apply the same knowledge that you have here. By the way, case in point about balancing and then adding the LUT there, I can see it's kind of coming through on the stream. Note that by applying the film stock LUT and then leveraging some of that vibrance, can you see that? There's green here. I mean, you could kind of guess that it was greenish. It's very, very dark green, but in fact, there's like green, and you can see sort of brown branches in there. I mean, it's just fun. Color is fun. I think the main thing is when I started doing this, I was super intimidated. I don't know why. I guess it's like, you know, going to Behance for the first time and you see all the amazing designers on there making work. And you're like, wow, I can't do this. I suck. And then you just sort of get intimidated. I was like that with color forever. And you just have to play. Now, someone right now might be watching and go, that blows. Well, that's your opinion. Here's another version of this one that I did. So again, right there, you could just see like total different looks and feels, right? Very, very quickly. Again, here's another one. So this one, this I actually used for, this made it into a little friend's short film here. Again, this is Santa Cruz. This is just the other part of where I was standing here. Want to point out too, let me just pause. Whoops, sorry, I knew that was going to happen. Pause right here. Now we got a little bit of noise, okay? Now that could be fixed with noise reduction. I didn't for this, but look at all the detail in the clouds as my sun, which again, we're kind of on there's absolutely some little blown out highlights right here, right? But very, very dramatic. But that's all through a combination of this, the Derek Zoolander blue steel creative look, some white balancing, and some light adjustment. Here's the original. It's okay. Kind of looks like a photo my mom would take, you know? Like, oh, that's nice. Then they share 8 versions of it with you. Look at that. Oh, look at that sunset. Oh, it's so beautiful. Like, yeah, it's sort of, the water looks brown and the sky looks blue, you know? Right? But this has the sky. Oh, yes. Drama. Again, maybe you're going, that sucks. Okay. What's that now? Peter Tahoe. Would be great to split the image and see one grade on the mountains and another on the sky in the same image. Mask on the horizon, Jason. Oh, well, yeah, I mean, look, you could, if you're just looking to kind of compare side by sides here, you can do that with our, let me see here. If that's what you're talking about, if you're just trying to do like a comparison view of these. Something like that. So this is by enabling the comparison view. Okay. You can also do that with the same footage if that's what you're asking too, in comparison view. And then like if you're trying to match these two things, we're not going to get into matching today, but we do have this split screen in comparison view. So if you're trying to kind of, now again, these don't look similar at all, right? But if you were trying to do something like that, this is how you could achieve that. Okay. So here's again, that was my original grade. This is the horizontal split. Here's the vertical split. Something like that. Okay, so that's with comparison view. That's a little more advanced. We're not getting into that today. Excellent though, Peter. Oh, 2 grades of the same image at the same time. Yes, well, you can do that. That'll segue into this one here. All right. In a way. Okay. So that's a little on, again, working with some non-log iPhone-y type footage. Okay, iPhone-y. All right, here's my good friend from Finland. He's not actually my good friend, just someone I've used on stream many, many times. And this particular clip is one of my favorites. Now, this was shot by a group in Germany called Silver Salts. Beautifully done footage. Again, you can even see now this is post grade, so I graded this myself, just to show you again the before. And it's not just a matter of that, because there are also some additional masks and things that I've got on here. This is what it looked like beforehand. Okay. And this is what it looked like after. So very, very dramatically different. But what you might notice, and this is sort of what Peter was just saying in the chat here, I have two grades happening here. Now they're affecting different parts of the image using masks, which we're going to talk about now. Now this may seem slightly advanced, but again, if you've kind of done masking and things in Photoshop, one, it's not difficult. Two, it's kind of a fundamental way of just edging up your presentation of your footage just a little bit here. All right. So when you look at the Lumetri panel, you may have noticed up at the top here that there's a little drop down. That's because you can have multiple layers of Lumetri effects applied to your footage. Okay. So again, now let's start with the raw one here. All right. Now this, I believe, was actually originally, this has been transcoded as ProRes 422HQ, but I believe this was originally shot, this particular one, or maybe it was converted, but also using an S-Log LUT. So that has already been applied. Sorry, undo what I just did there. This is what we get when we apply that LUT. So again, you can see right away how it just bakes all of that color back in and really makes a pretty fundamental difference to this. Okay, really, really good. But again, for me, as I go into my scopes here, it's a little too contrasty for me. Again, here is my sort of finished one, a little more balanced, just a little more blue. Right, this one, it's not as vibrant as it could be. Always a stylistic choice. Let me just go in here and make sure that I've only got one. Okay, so we've just got the one layer in here. All right. So we applied the basic correction LUT here. And again, now at this point, I could start to do additional tweaks on this. But remember that this is going to affect the entire image. So, right away, as mentioned, I typically like to drop contrast a little bit. And I usually pull it sort of all the way down and then bring it back in, I like the contrast on his face, but then we lose some of the definition in his eyes. And again, the focal point on his eyes and everything was so good. I don't want to lose all of that. But I'm going to drop that contrast a bit. Maybe adjust the black level here. I'm not going to use any creative LUTs. Highlights and everything else look good. The sky's really good. I would love to just apply some additional color just to his face, just to the skin tones, just to kind of warm it up a little bit, right? Now, there's a couple different ways that you can do that with Lumetri, but a really easy way is through masking. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to add another layer of Lumetri and then mask only the face so that only the face is affected with that layer of Lumetri. So I'm going to come up here to our drop down and choose Add Lumetri Color Effect. And I'm going to rename it Face Only. And you'll see that that applies here, okay? All right. So now I'm going to take my ellipse mask and I'm going to create a mask on our guy's head here. All right, pull this out a little bit. I don't really have to worry so much about the hair, really. I've got some feathering options here, so you can see how that works. I want to be careful with that feather. These are all non-destructive, so we can always modify these after. What I do want to be careful about is I want to make sure I get his neck in there and his ear. And you can see I can add additional points as needed. All right. No one's head is a perfect oval or ellipse. And then I'm simply going to come over to our mask path controls and I'm going to track selected mask forward, which it's going to do for me. All right. Do the tracking for me. Just so. Now I may have gone a little wide on his face there. I'm realizing that might affect the cloud area a little bit, but we'll see. And look at that. So we now have a mask around his head. So now, because I'm only affecting the masked area, I can come over to temperature, right? And apply that. And why is that applying to everything? I shouldn't be doing that. What's happening here? Why is it applying to everything? That shouldn't be happening. Oh, because I'm on the background. Ugh, you dope. Okay, user error. I was on the background layer. Dummy. Okay. Face only. There we go. Okay, thought I was losing my mind. You're only human. You're supposed to make mistakes. Okay. So again, now you can see why I'd want to maybe dial it in a little bit more on his face. I'm not going to go that extreme, of course. Now, we can, again, further refine that mask. This is where also a little bit of feathering can go a long way. All right, so we can kind of feather into the clouds. Can we negative expand the mask here? No, we can only... oh, actually we can, yeah. So maybe I'm going to tighten this up just a little bit, right? So we don't leave as much as that space around there. Notice that's all happening. The mask, the tracking has already happened. So we can make those corrections after the fact. Maybe we'll add a little bit of vibrance in there. Okay, like that. Maybe I want to pump up those shadows just a bit. Okay, looking good. Let's click away so that's gone. Pretty sweet. And like, okay. And by the way, you notice like we don't have a significant amount of glow around his face. I could have made that mask a little tighter. I was being a little flippant with my selection there, but you saw that the feathering and negative expansion really cleaned that up now. Turn it off. Whoa, what? That was it before? It still looks flat. Turn it back on. Wow, nice. That's how they do it in the films. Before, after. Pretty slick, if I do say so myself. One mask. Now on this one, which you may have noticed, here is my, again, I like this one actually a little bit better. You'll notice what I did here. Again, it's always a little different. This one overall is warmer. Now I could, in fact, warm up the background on this one and saturate a bit more. This is on the one we just did, the saturation. Okay, again, it's going to saturate everything. And remember, his face is still there. Now I could copy the mask, paste it on the background, which is actually what I did here. So what I did instead, so we have the mask path on this top layer for his head, okay? And then on the background layer, I have the same mask applied, but it's inverted. So that means it's going the other direction. So when I have the background selected here, I'm only affecting the background colors, not the head. And you can see that, right? Look at how everything's getting very blue, but not his face, right? So we can kind of push it right to the edge there. And then when I go to the foreground, now it's just his face, okay? And that's just a copy paste of the mask. I didn't have to redo it. So really flexible, really cool. That one looks very Hollywood. It's a little much, actually. Probably need to back that off just a little bit. Okay, I still like it. I stand by my work. Okay. All right, we got 15 minutes. Okay. Very good. Okay. Sing that song too. Yeah, I've been rewatching The Boys, so got Billy Joel in the mind. Peter, really nice improvement. Thank you. Omar, does the order of the layers matter? And what is that order? It matter. No, not really. No. And in the case of me, again, applying a mask or multiple masks, it just depends. Remember, like, because in my new version, I didn't have that mask inverted on the bottom layer of Lumetri. When I apply an effect to that bottom layer, remember the face was in that bottom layer. So it's applying saturation to that face or whatever I'm doing to the face as well. So the order can matter. It doesn't necessarily matter. They're not mutually exclusive, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Depends what you're trying to do. Now, again, something we're not covering today, there is another way to do this, which is in some cases a little more precise, and that's using what are known as HSL, hue, saturation, luminance, secondaries. Okay, now you can find this on my channel. Covered this many, many times. And this allows you to select individual colors. And this is where, again, sometimes layer order may matter if you're trying to affect, certain colors in a scene or in a frame. Which, do I have a version where we want to do that? I mean, I guess I can do that here too. But I'm gonna do it without HSL secondaries. I'm gonna do it with curves. Okay. All right, I got like 2 more things that I want to cover here. We got like 7 minutes. Okay. So here we are. We're back to MP4 footage. All right. So not raw, not log. Good old standard baked in color Rec 709. Just because it's baked in doesn't mean, again, that you can't really kind of change the mood, change the feel. Now, without doing anything, right, so nothing's selected here, just want to point out again. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and just put on a LUT, all right? Let's scroll through some of these. All right, some nice black and white ones. Okay. And, they all kind of have a similar look. Now, when we get into, like, the blue cold, again, you're sort of getting very cinematic-y here. Kind of, again, crushing some of those shadows a little too much for my taste. But this kind of gives you an idea of, like, what happens. You still have flexibility. Look, this one, day for night. I mean, it does kind of look that way. Of course, it's a little deceptive because we see the sun reflecting those buildings over here. So, not exactly. But, these are fun. They're fun to play around with. And they can give you some pretty unique and different looks. Yeah, some of these like Gold Rush ones, they're pretty cool. They're really kind of just emphasizing what it already looks like, right? It is a very warm San Francisco day here. But with just, simple temperature control, and realistically, to be honest, having stayed in this location a million times, this, and maybe it is just like a white, let's see if the white balance does it. I don't remember if I know exactly what is white here. I'm guessing that building. Let's see. Let's see if white balance will cool this off for us. Oh yeah, it did. It also made it a little green. I like just adjusting the temp. But it was sort of a combo between these two of how I remember this looking. Okay? And right away, it just sort of changed the, like, oh, it's not so warm anymore. It feels just a little more neutral. And there's a lot of detail in here. I mean, we're fitting this to the view. This is 4K, so, as you look out on the horizon here, again, there's a lot of detail in that background, right? So much detail over here. All the parked cars, all the little, I don't know if those are bushes or oil slicks, but a lot of detail, okay? And then again, you can come in here. This is an area where I might use a little bit of faded film to drop some of that contrast, which gives me even more detail in the shadows. More reveals. Oh, I see little sort of people things down there now. I want to remind everybody, it's actually, it's real footage here, not just a still. So, you can really adjust the mood the feel, bring in some of those shadows. Now again, how are my scopes looking? Yeah, not bad. You know? Not offending anybody. Maybe. People do get offended easily these days. You never know. Maybe want to bring down those highlights. Look at how nice that is now. Now, suddenly now you're kind of getting more of the shadowy detail here and in the clouds, right? And maybe bottom, so this is the very bottom of the Lumetri Color panel. You want to get a little more cinematic, you can add a little vignette here, add a little drama in the corners, which is going to add, just by nature, because we're darkening those corners, adds kind of a little inadvertent saturation in the reds down here, right, on this building. So before, it's like totally looks like a totally different time of day. After, right? And maybe we even pump up the sat a little bit. Like that. Okay? Before. I don't like the look of that. After. I like the look of that. Personal pref. Still looks a little green to me. I'd probably back this off a little. That looks better to me. Almost adding back a little more magenta, especially in this area right here. San Francisco, because of the nice fog and smog, you tend to have a kind of more magenta-y leaning, foggy, you know, what's it called? I just forgot what's the fog called there? It's not Fred. It's a name. It's a proper name. I just forgot what they call it. I've only been going there for 20 years. That's all right. It's end of the stream. Okay. Ahmed Khattab, if you want a complete color grading mastery, could you recommend a source for that? There are a couple. I'm forgetting them right now. Oh my gosh. Simon Walker. Google Simon Walker. I don't know if he's still with Red Giant. He's a friend of mine. Amazing colorist, written a whole bunch of books, done a bunch of tutorials. Very, very good. Very, very knowledgeable. There are many. You can also go, if you just want more detail on how to use the tool, I, of course, have dozens of these videos, but Simon Walker, that would be one to check out. There's a lot in the Red Giant family. Stu Maschwitz is another. You can Google and find Stu. He's also part of Red Giant, I think, still. Brilliant, brilliant guy, super nice guy, done a lot of stuff on color. Robbie Corman is another. These are all names you can Google. And you can really learn how to do this stuff very stylistically. All right. Sir, my masking going out of the borders. What to do? You just saw me masking going out of the borders. It should still track it. Now, again, if you're talking about if you're having tracking issues, you know, keep in mind that in this particular case, it's not, there's nothing obstructing the track, you know? So it's still able to hang on because a lot of it is still within frame. If you had a lot of busyness in here, you know, like if I were trying to maybe track, if I were trying to track that foot right there, I mean, it's still, I guess there's that could be challenging in Premiere without having to do a couple process, maybe 2 tracks, or maybe you'd have to do this in After Effects because the foot becomes completely obscured by the leg, like not completely, but enough where, and it's blurry, so it might lose the track, and it also goes off screen too, but it's more about if there's obstruction. It shouldn't be so much an issue if it's still within frame, but a little bit off screen. It's more about if there's something in front or behind it. Well, in front of. Yeah. Carl, that's the fog. Thank you, Misty. My goodness, what's wrong with my brain? I'll tell you what, the stream is over. That's why I'm so sad. I just forgot everything I know. Carl the Fog, that's it. All right, friends. Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining. You can catch the replays on all of the associated streaming networks. I'm looking very red in the cheeks right now. Looks like somebody graded me. My lips are looking very red too. Maybe I just look incredibly healthy today. Aaron, your way is really effective. Oh, thanks. Okay. Karen, how are you doing? Nice to see you. Okay, with that, friends, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we will see you again next week, next time, on the next one. That was 3 nexts right there. I think I need sleep. Maybe not. All right, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.